My Zoom starting. Okay, all right. I'll talk to you later. Okay, bye. Hello.
Hey, Paul, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I can't complain. Now, what, you in Guilford County?
Good. I'm in Pender County.
Pender. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Well, and how's things going down?
Way down at the beach.
Oh, I know where Pender County is.
Yep. Things are going pretty good. We're finishing up summer school this week.
Already?
Yeah, it was only 8 days.
Oh, okay.
So they'll test on tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday again. And then we're done.
Now, if they're successful, my guess is they go on. If they're not, they can still be placed. Is that correct?
They go on regardless.
Regardless, okay.
Regardless. They get to go.
And what grade are we talking that you're working with?
5th grade.
5th grade, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, just in case, I did hit the record button, so I will be able to send out this video when we get through. Now, I wanted to make sure that everybody understood, and this will be in the recording, that when you do join a Zoom session, in order to get credit for it, you do need to post your own Zoom link and put it in that appropriate spot to get credit for it. So make sure we've had 2 groups do a Zoom, and I just want to make sure that if you haven't uploaded your part in that Zoom, whether it's just the audio or whether you did the audio and video, I still need to have you to put your link up so I can give you those points for that. Each Zoom session is in fact worth 4 points. Also, I want to remind you, if you have not completed your city training, to please do so, and then post those results in a screenshot in the appropriate spot. Okay, let's start off with questions that you might have. Anybody? Did y'all get an email earlier this week? Well, it couldn't have been earlier than this week. It had to have been either Monday or Friday, about a survey that is sent out usually at the end of the semester. Did you get a link to that saying when it would be active and all that kind of stuff? Okay. Well, it should be similar to the same survey that you would have done at the end of 601. I'm going to send you a go-over kind of memo as to the things they're going to ask you. And then what I'd like for you to do is consider what things I should work on and how I've felt like I wanted to adjust and do and work with you people. So that should come out. The email sort of explains itself. I think you do the survey I put in your grades, then you do the survey, and then they release the grades, and then I get the results of the survey. And that's the only thing that's coming down the pike that you will get involved with within the next 5 or so weeks. This is week 5, so let's keep in mind. Kevin, I was talking to him earlier before you jumped in about your group had already done one Zoom session, and I think it was Jessica that was on there for the audio part, and she posted that as her Zoom session. Is that correct, Jess? Or am I making that up?
I should have been, yeah, I was on my phone for the Zoom session, but you should have had all 4 of us on there, right?
I did, but everybody needs to load up their own part for grades. And Kevin, just in case you hadn't given someone had given you your street cred, your singing skills at the beginning of that Zoom session were entertaining. And I thought I'd point that out to you. I mean, I'm watching these things and listening to these things, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe they don't know what they're doing or they're recording it. But, yeah, you sort of warmed the crowd up there. Everybody got on board. But Jessica did record. All of you recorded it, but Jessica put hers up in the spot for me to grant the 4 points and to move that off your plate. I need the other 3 to do the same thing. It'll be the same video. I understand that. But for me to acknowledge you in those 4 points, I need you to follow through. Plus the other group did the same thing. Okay, tonight we're going to talk about Chapter 7, and then we're going to talk about Chapter 8. Now, what we're going to discuss in 7, basically in 8, is what you do every year as you're given a group of kids, and then someone will come around with some scores based on an algorithm as to what those kids should do by the end of the year. Do they do that in your school or school system? Anybody? What's the thing that is done now where they calculate the kids' results from, like, say, if they were 6th graders, and what they say that those kids who are in current 5th grade should make as your new batch of 6th graders for next year? What do they call that process?
The EVOS system.
The EVOS. Thank you. Yes, Kevin, you're right. It is the EVOS scores. Now, so they'll project your students are supposed to do this, this, and this. But what happens when yours, do you understand, from what I understand of it, let's suppose your students, I'm going to make these grade levels up and whatever. Let's suppose you teach 6th grade and your students scored in the 60th percentile. Then what they're going to say is next year, that group of 5th graders are coming up to achieve some form of growth. They're going to need to score at least a 66th percentile, or basically 10%. Now, what do y'all think about that theory and that practice?
Dr. Bowen, we've had a meeting with a guy named Michael LeClaire. He actually is like over us in our district, and he told us that what we see as projected growth, like during the school year, is not really truly projected growth. They said that they can't really get the projected growth until after all tests have been submitted. So it's kind of like last year, I calculated my projected growth based on what I saw DOG scores and what they had in the system, and my numbers were kind of shaky. I was kind of disappointed that I might not receive the bonus money, but when it came back, my scores were much higher. So it wasn't accurate at all.
Right. Do you think in your case or in others, do y'all think it is a fair comparison using EVOS?
Not really.
I
honestly,
I haven't found anybody to say absolutely we swear by it. There are too many variables. There are too many variables to the point where you're almost comparing apples to oranges.
Right.
But it's the standard that we use currently today. 10, 15 years ago, they would have issued an expectancy band. And within that band, you and your class or you and your school would be expected to land somewhere in that band of 50 to 70 or 40 to 60 or whatever. But the old term used to be the expectancy band. And you, your class, your students, your school, you were expected to land somewhere in that range. It was a little more loose, but I've always thought it was fair because most people would end up landing in that expectancy band. But now they're giving you more direct information about the numbers. And like you said, Kevin, they really can't project next year or what you do until all that data is entered and they do what they do to it. And then you can look at the numbers and then they go from there.
Right.
You look at it whether it's right or wrong, but that's how we're judged at this point. Okay. So one of the terms that you need to start listening and looking to is called a population sample. Kevin, what grade do you teach?
I've taught 7th for the past 3, but they decided to move me up with my students this year, so I'll be in the 8th grade. Okay,
so you're going to loop up with that same group of kids. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Be it good or bad, I don't see it. I think you can make the best of it. I think sometimes it's a good situation. So would you consider that group that you're moving up with, or if you're getting a new batch, would that be considered your population sample, your group of students that you're going to work with where they will generate some kind of report from their success or whatever during that time? That is correct. What happens is when they start looking at the population sample, they compare one group to another group within your same school. And y'all are at a special school or something, you and she's not with us tonight, one of your partners.
Yeah, Schamberger.
What are y'all in a special school? Anybody here in just a regular school with a regular mixture of 5th, 6th, 7th, or 8th graders?
Oh, we're at a regular school. We just happen to have all boy classes. It was something they were trying out for the past 3 years.
Okay.
Next year we'll have females and males in the same classroom for us.
Okay.
Other classes still have that. We just happen to be a specific team that taught all boys.
All right. In your group of all males, do they have more than just one group of all males?
Not really.
Okay.
Just our guys will be the all male team.
Well, when they go back and look at a population sample, they're going to want to take a group of 3rd graders, for an example, as a heterogeneous grouping of other 3rd graders to see if the two samplings now they truly need to be somewhat the same, males, right, females, ability groups, and things like that, to do a comparison. Now, so these two groups work together, they progress during the school year and that kind of stuff. And then they look at the data that those two groups generate. They will run what they call is a p-value. And it's another research kind of term where they can assess if your kids did this, they would estimate that the other classes' results would be somewhat the same. And they would assess it at something like a p-value of less than 100, 1/100. The greater the number, the more chances that those two classes are going to end up being different and something happen. But for the most part, in research and education, the p-value is always going to be less than 1/100 when they're comparing sample.
We saw the p.
What, Kevin?
We saw the p-value in the when Mr. LeClaire came and talked to us. He showed us how we break down tests and everything to see if the test question was good, if it was a bad test question, it might have been written wrong. And he discussed p-value then, so he explained it a little bit to us in terms of our when we created our assessments.
Good.
So I never really looked at it in terms of the class in a whole.
That's exactly what he or she was doing. Okay. Now, do you think that the next thing when they're comparing p-values, is there a margin of error? You may have heard that during the exit polls from our latest election. They usually come out and they sample a group of about 100 people, and then they determine, based on that number, there could be a margin of error. And then they're going to base, the larger the group that they survey typically costs more money. So they'll typically ask about 100 people in an exit poll, either in school or from an election or whatever, what the results was, and then they will generate some type of report as to who they think will win. That doesn't always, let me repeat that doesn't always report as accurate. I think we found out in the last 2, 3, 4 elections that they can do exit polls. If, first of all, are those people that are coming out who voted, are they telling the truth? And then number 2, where did they get their sampling from? Is it in an all Democratic area, an independent party area, a Republican area? You got a lot of variables in that. But when they do those exit interviews and they determine a margin of error, that's when they use that statement when they start reporting the results. As you look through Chapter 7, did you read anything about what they refer to as the null hypothesis? Okay, that's basically what I was talking about earlier, when you got this group of 3rd graders and then they grow and they're taught basically the same way or the same information from another group. And if there's no big difference between the 2 groups and their statistical analysis or their review, they will say that it does exhibit the null hypothesis, which indicates the p-value is going to be the same for about both groups. I know y'all are all doing some type of data collection as far as you're doing this and you're doing that, and how you're going to indicate that this child increased doing this, this child increased doing that. And usually you would study that in a math program or an English, language arts, or something like that. Social studies is not necessarily an easy one right now, nor is science. But math and language arts are the easiest of the 4. So, go out. Okay. So what we're dealing with is something where you can generate numbers and then figure out a way if there was any type of growth. Typically, in a school system, they will do that generation of math for you and say, this group performed at this level, and this level. If you're working on your next degree, there's a piece of software where you would put in all your data from the first time you tested those kids, and then the second time at the end of the school year where you tested those kids, and then it will generate, was there any significant growth, and what the p-value was, and what variables you may want to review. It's that name of the software, I think they still use it, it's called SPSS, but you won't be messing with any of that as you do your own data collection. You'll figure out a way to say, okay, based on what I've done, and you know, there may be someone at your school, or there may be someone really at the school system that can generate that data, or you can look at it yourself and see if the scores went up. And typically, the more students that you have in a study of at least 30, the better your information will be. If you just pick 5 and you generate some information, that's not really a broad enough database for you to make a decision that this actually worked, this didn't work, we want to try this again in a school-wide setting. So, spinning on another topic out of Chapter 7, if we just extended the school year, I'm saying right now the kids go to school how many days a year? 180?
For us, we have 190.
Okay. What if we extend it to 200? Would that make a world of difference? Or would if we're getting some negative yes and no's on that, or do you see, and Nadine, I know what your answer is going to be, or do you think year-round school is the way to go?
Me personally, I think year-round school is the way to go.
And
I think it would even be worth trying in the high school level. I know they haven't, but I think it would be something worthwhile.
Anybody else got a thought? How many in Lake County, Nadine, do you know how many schools, what do y'all got, 100 and some schools, and how many elementaries do you have that are year-round?
I don't know. I think if I'm not mistaken, though, it's fewer year rounds than traditional.
I would guess so.
And I think it might be I think it's a far spread too.
Did they try to convert some of those year rounds to traditional this year, and they took a pushback?
Yeah, they are trying to do it. They're between, I think, this year and next.
Okay. But I think once those parents get involved with that schedule and it works with their families and they see the positive that takes, in my opinion, for either the enrichment or the remediation, I think it's the way to go. I really do, especially like you said at the elementary level. And I don't see why we try everything else, why we shouldn't try it at least with the middle school and see how that goes over a 2 or 5 year period and then move in the direction of high school. We
do have it in the middle schools too.
Okay.
We feed into a middle school that is year round also. And then it's from there that they no longer feed into the high school. Then it's traditional.
Okay. Anybody else? What are you thinking about year round versus traditional?
In Pender County, we only have one school that's year round out of the whole county. And at my school, we pushed for it. We had meetings, we had votes, and the parents were with it. And then it got to the board and they kicked it out. So we all wanted it, but we just can't get it. We fight for it, we can't get it. What did the
school systems, what were they pushing for the year-round trial?
No. They only have it at one school, and that's it. Okay. And it's a K through 8 school that has it.
Do keep in mind when those issues pop up where there's community. Now, this is a political statement. When school issues pop up and the community and everything's on board and they're pressing for this type of change, if the board doesn't see or they do a study or the merit of this and that, it's the same principle as when the superintendent or the board decides to change attendance zones. You may not know this, but when that starts off, the superintendent's working on his resume. Do you want me to repeat that one? Those are the things that will end your political career in a school system when they do something. Parents in Charlotte, Jeff, tell them what's going on. The parents were all up in arms a month ago about neighborhood schools and changing this and changing that. And what did they finally do? How'd that finally end in Charlotte?
They still have a 2-year plan in place. Not too many changes next year. They just moved some schools around so that they would be changing some feeder patterns and things like that. They're trying to offer as many choices as possible. So lots of magnets, lots of stems, all that kind of stuff. But it's changing some of our neighborhood schools around, and parents are in an uproar because, as a parent, you move to a neighborhood a lot of times because of the school.
Absolutely.
And then they say, we're going to move borders and all that kind of stuff. So. And
again, the parents who are in that nice big auditorium, the multi-level auditorium, holding up those signs, and they're looking at the board members who are voting one way or the other, and they're thinking, we'll take care of this in 2 years or in 4 years. That's when political changes occur, either from the superintendent's level or from the board level. If they're not happy, it's just sort of like a county commissioner's position. You can't do anything about a decision that they make. You can only deal with it when it's time for re-election. That's the only power you've got. Therefore, when you make a vote, you never should take it lightly. You should do your homework to figure out what these people could potentially do. All right, flip over to 8. Let's talk about that one for a second. Do you think, and I don't mean this in a negative way, are there more racial gaps in language arts and mathematics at the elementary level? Where are the greatest gaps, achievement gaps in our public school system? What do you think?
I think that it starts in the elementary school level.
I agree.
I think it's a language-based thing also, non-English speakers or limited English speakers more than anything. And seeing as math is language-based, if they don't have that, there's a big gap.
They're already at a deficit. You're correct. I
heard somewhere, Dr. Bowen.
Go ahead.
I heard somewhere, Dr. Bowen, that where I teach in a Title I school, the population is about 60, probably about 65% African American and 30% Asian and everything else, maybe 2% Caucasian. I heard somewhere in a study that it was like people, for example, at Northwest Guilford, opposed to Allen, they experience about 1,500 more vocabulary words than my population. So, I mean, it's been statistics that have already stated that they're not even getting the same vocabulary as they're getting older, as they're getting into the education.
And these others may not know that, but in your part of High Point, comparing it to that part of Guilford County in Northwest, they're worlds apart. One of them could actually be in France and you would even know it. It's almost a bad defense to try to compare those two pockets of schools, because what is working in Northwest, I'm sure there's some improvement in your area of High Point, but they're on a different playing field in the Northwest pocket. Absolutely. It used to be the inner city schools versus those out in the rural county, but that's not always the case anymore. There's still holdout pockets like Northwest. Heaven forbid I mention Oak Ridge, Summerfield, Laughlin. Do you want me to continue? And then you've got that interesting little duck over there called Stokesdale. That's another world in itself. And like Jeff was saying, parents move to certain regions because of what their children will be exposed to, if they can. But that's not always the case. You may have to just deal with what happens. Okay, so we've been talking about EVOS and average yearly progress, what you were supposed to make. How do the school systems, or in particular your administrative team, deal with you in going over your EVOS scores or your average yearly progress? Is it one of those?
Dr. Bowen, before you move on that, can I ask you a question? You may have an answer for this, because I heard this is true. I heard that if the school is in your area, like what you and Jeff were talking about, people moving to certain communities because of certain schools, I heard that the value of your house will go down if your school is getting bad scores, is that true? I think there's some type of causal relationship between a school. When a realtor exhibits a piece of property, like in the northwest corner of Guilford, they'll say, well, our students go to Summerfield or Oak Ridge, and then they feed to Northwest Middle and Northwest High. That's a selling point. I don't know that if it's looked upon as far as the tax department in Guilford County, if that's a direct link, but it is a selling point with the realtors as to where that house is and what the feeder pattern promotes itself to where those kids go to school. I don't see how somebody could make a tax adjustment based on, well, yours is going to a High Point City school. That's going to lower your tax value. I would hate to think that has entered into the property. If you've bought and sold property, a lot of it has to do with the comps in your area, your neighborhood. That might be what you're thinking, but I don't think it has to do with the performance of the school in the area.
Well, I know if I can just say, when we moved down here to North Carolina, as a family with kids who are in school, one of the things you do look at is, what are your schools like? Now, coming from where I came from up north, I taught in many different type of cultural schools.
Sure.
So, truthfully, people do look where homes are and where they're going to go to schools.
Mm-hmm.
And the neighborhood school thing, that's what we had, again, up north. It was neighborhood schools. You lived here, this is where you were going to school. But down here, it's like huge difference.
Yeah. And obviously parents are looking at, most parents are not generally stupid. They will look at your school report card and the teacher working conditions survey of your particular school And then, all of a sudden they're making opinions based on just a written document before they even go to the school to do a walk around visit, meet this, take in this kind of stuff. They're looking at paper documents from around the world, across the United States or whatever, to narrow down what part of Wake County. Okay, so you go to Wake County. Do you want yours going to Fuquay-Varina, or do you want yours going to Cary? Tell the truth. Do I need to finish?
Well, all right. So I don't go to either one.
Okay.
My kids are at Middle Creek, so I'm right there in the middle of Fuquay and Cary. So I get it. Yeah, most people would say that they want to go to Cary, of course. But I can also tell you Fuquay is in the process of, I think this is their last year in the high school that's existing, that they're rebuilding. So who knows what's going to happen? I know the population might not change, but it might be attracting for other reasons then.
Well, my guess is, looking at Wake County, the only place they've got to move is going to be toward the east. I don't think they can move west. They're bunching in on Durham County, north to Pearson and whatever else is up in that area, and south down toward Chatham. I think the only bubble they can squeeze is going to be toward the east. So,
well, Dr. Bowen, I feel like a lot of students, a lot of parents are moving to the higher costing homes because they think that's where the higher education is going to be.
Well, is this Dante?
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking up at your garage door opener.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I didn't see it talking, but I got you now. But okay, so you pick a neighborhood that has the homes or the area or the things that you want your family to have, and then you do a support by going and looking at the neighborhood school at the elementary and middle and high school level. That's just good business. I would agree with you, Dante.
That's what's happening a lot of times at Wake County. If you look at a lot of the northern counties, or not of the northern portion of the county, a lot of their scores are really high. When you take into point like Heritage High School, they're really good as far as test scores.
Right.
You look at some of the magnet schools inside the city, they're trying to draw students in just because they may not have the best test scores.
That's the whole purpose of a magnet school, to draw a different group of people to offset or balance what they want to do. That's the whole get-go of a magnet. To force parents, and I hate to use that word, but to force parents to take them and move them and go to a different school. And some of those magnet schools are great. There's no doubt about that, in the different immersion programs. I mean, think about what y'all have available in the different foreign languages, from Japanese, Chinese, Latin, whatever. I mean, it's out there, but the question is, are you affluent enough that you can transport and move your child and deal with the transportation issues? I mean, it's just because it's there doesn't mean you get to take advantage of it.
This is true.
There are a lot of barriers you still have to jump over.
This is true.
Let's see. We talked about comparing. We don't use AYP now. We have switched over to EVOS. We talked about comparing groups of kids to a group of kids and how the test scores are set, what percentage. So overall, are you judged at your individual school, comparing teachers to teachers, based on what results? Do you get called in every time you get a new batch of kids and you're told this is where they performed last year, these are some strengths, these are some needs, we would like for you to work on those kind of needs in this year-long process? Do you ever get those kind of pep talks? Or am I just dreaming that too? Nobody? I mean, are you just giving a bunch of kids, and then somebody says, now, you got 30 kids in this class, and maybe, I don't know what the state statute's going to do this year with lowering the class size at the elementary level. You get a bunch of kids, and they're going to say, okay, here's a list. You need to go to guidance to see which ones have a 504, an IEP, or which ones are medically fragile, or which ones have allergies. But do you have someone to sit down with you and talk to you about the overall performance of the projected performance of these students, and where, or is that something you have to figure out on your own and doing some pre and post testing?
We don't have any projections.
Go ahead.
I was saying we don't have any projections given to us. They will show us the previous year's like EOG scores, and then when we come back in, then we'll set goals and say, hey, we want to increase these scores by 10 points. But we have to take it upon ourselves to look at what they're projected at. We do what we call FADA, and that just tells like what they made on all of their assessments, and including their EOG score. So what they want to see on the FADA is that they're always growing on their assessments, including the retest and so forth, the common assessments.
Okay.
So by the end of the year, hopefully they'll meet that goal of growth.
And in certain school systems, they have a carrot that they hang over your head. If your students perform at this level, here's what you're going to get. Okay? But keep in mind, out of the 115 school systems in this state, not all of them offer those carrots. Keep that in mind. Charlotte, Wake, Guilford. I'm not sure there are many more other than those three major, maybe Winston-Salem, Forsyth, that offer those types of, I don't want to use that phrase, performance-based bonus, but basically, isn't that what it is? If you perform and you take a group of kids and you find out what causes them to tick and you get them to launch and you move them right up the ladder, you may put in more time than the teacher across the hall. And if you're in one of those Equity Plus schools or whatever, one third grade teacher might get the bonus in that track, and then the one across the hall might just get their regular salary and supplement. But be it right or wrong, I think a lot of us have moved in that direction. Okay. Anything else? I just want to hit those bullets out of 7 and 8. We're talking about tested groups. We've talked about looking at p-values, which ones, if the p-value is less than 1/100%, then that means any group of, in this case, third graders, they're going to perform at about the same level. The greater the number in a p-value situation, the more the changes and everything like that will occur. Thank goodness in your school system, even the smaller LEAs, the smaller school system, if you've got somebody who's crunching those numbers every year, and ever since now that you've done the school year's over, they've done the reteach, retest, and they're doing follow-up testing, those people will be extremely busy getting things done. And I would guess that most of those people are working on a 12-month contract, because that's their busiest time of year, is when they're crunching those numbers and coming out with reports that, yes, the superintendent wants to see, whoever you have in charge of instruction wants to see, and then after they have made the presentation to the board, they release that data to the news agencies. But there is a proper protocol as to who gets it what. And after the superintendent presents it to the board, then he or she can share it with the principals, and it filters down that way. And then after the board, news organizations get to pick up. And that's why all that stuff is hot and heavy in late August or early September. Why do you think it takes so long for the State Department to generate the data of the school report card? Because until it's verified and validated by DPI. I told you I was coming back. I don't know where this thing, we lasted about 40 minutes, 45 minutes this time. Did that happen last week, didn't it? I know, I reckon I should pay the phone bill where I get the internet service. Maybe I'll think about that. Other than that, I want you to keep working, keep Zooming. If you were part of a Zoom and you haven't put up your Zoom link, do so. Now, it took me a while, Nadine, but unless you put up your Zoom with an active link, I have to cut and then go to a search engine and paste that Zoom and then hit play. That's not the end of the it's not the end of the world. I did that with y'all's. Okay? But that's okay. I'd rather y'all keep putting it up like you know how to do, and I just copy and paste in the search engine to get it to work on my end.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. I'd rather you continue to do what y'all are doing and let me just process it on this end so I can see what y'all are doing. Okay? So get those Zooms out of the way. Don't forget to post your city training if you haven't. Keep answering the questions out of the chapters, and you did get the revised edition as to which ones I cut out somewhere starting after 12, but I think I pulled 5 of them back. In order to keep the same scores in place, I went ahead and issued 2 points per chapter like I had said, so the points are still there. I'm going to issue some information on that upcoming survey as to what they're looking for, similar to what they look for in 601. And I want to make sure you understand what the grading scale is, and you see your grade every day. You put up work, I grade it, I give it a number, and you know where you are. So there are no surprises. There's no gotchas. There's no me jumping out from behind the bush and going boo. You know what the numbers are as we move right along. And that's the way it needs to be. No surprises. Questions? Anybody? Okay. Unless something happens, which I hope, other than this strange, you go somewhere and I come back, I'll see y'all next Tuesday at about 7:30. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Y'all take care. Keep working.
All right, bye.
Bye now.